The glittering skyline of Los Angeles has always served as a breathtakingly deceptive backdrop for the darkest of family secrets, a brilliant juxtaposition that the bold and the beautiful has mastered over the decades. In a world where haute couture hides heinous crimes and boardroom battles mask deep-seated emotional traumas, the sudden and tragic death of Luna Nozawa has been a lingering phantom. It is a dark, suffocating cloud hanging over the legacy of Forrester Creations. For months, the canvas has been rife with whispered speculations, pointed fingers, and unanswered questions regarding the true circumstances of her untimely demise. At the center of this swirling vortex of suspicion has stood Melissa Dillon, a woman whose enigmatic presence and fiercely guarded demeanor have made her an incredibly easy target for wild accusations. But as the intricate layers of deception are finally peeled back, the audience is thrust into a narrative of such profound tragedy and cosmic cruelty that it entirely redefines the landscape of the show. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of the impending revelation, one must first deeply examine the psychological torment that has been Melissa Dillon's daily existence. Recently, Melissa has been the terrified recipient of mysterious, disguised phone calls, a haunting, distorted voice echoing from the shadows, claiming that they have unresolved, dangerous, unfinished business. Every sudden ring of her phone has been a jarring, terrifying reminder of a traumatic past she desperately tried to outrun. This relentless, psychological stalking has pushed her to the absolute brink of a nervous breakdown, leaving her incredibly vulnerable and dangerously exposed. Simultaneously, she has been navigating a treacherous, unforgiving minefield at Forrester Creations, trapped in a massive moral dilemma, as R.J. Forrester ruthlessly leverages his power as the boss's son to coerce her into a toxic, destructive alliance. The ultimate catalyst for the complete and utter shattering of Melissa's carefully constructed world arrives in the formidable form of Remy Price. Remy's sudden, unexpected appearance in Los Angeles has been shrouded in intense mystery, his true motives completely obscured by a dense veil of secrecy. Speculation ran rampant regarding his surprise connection to the canvas, with wild whispers suggesting he might be the malicious force behind the disguised phone calls. However, the staggering reality of Remy's purpose is far more profound, heartbreaking, and devastating than anyone could have possibly anticipated. He does not come bearing malicious intent or petty vengeance, but rather the heavy, burdensome, and inescapable truth of a shared, undeniable bloodline. The intense confrontation between Remy and Melissa is not a bitter clash of sworn enemies, but a harrowing, emotional collision of past and present. The precise moment Remy produces the thick manila envelope containing the official DNA test results is an absolute masterclass in dramatic, heart-stopping suspense. The physical object itself, a simple, unassuming piece of clinical paper, holds the terrifying power to completely rewrite history and utterly destroy lives. Remy's demeanor shifts from enigmatic and guarded to deeply somber as he presents the undeniable, scientific proof of a long-buried, tragic family secret. He does not deliver the life-altering news with cruel triumph or calculated malice, but with a quiet, devastating finality that chills the blood. The heavy words he speaks hang in the stagnant air, heavy and suffocating, as he reveals the exact, indisputable results of the genetic testing. The stark, unforgiving black ink on the pristine white paper confirms a truth that is miraculously beautiful and monstrously cruel. Melissa Dillon and Luna Nozawa are biological sisters. The sheer, unadulterated shock that violently washes over Melissa is a visceral, agonizing, and deeply uncomfortable spectacle to witness. The realization that she shared a profound biological bond, an undeniable genetic connection, with the beautiful woman whose tragic death has haunted her every waking moment is a psychological trauma of unimaginable proportions. For her entire life, Melissa had navigated the cold world believing in a specific, lonely narrative of her origins, a solitary existence completely devoid of this crucial, anchoring familial tie. To suddenly discover that she had a sister who was living, breathing, and walking the exact same glamorous halls of Forster Creations, is a revelation that should have brought immense joy. Instead, it brings only a suffocating, paralyzing wave of absolute despair. The cruelest twist of fate is the timing of this discovery. Melissa and Luna were entirely oblivious to their shared bloodline until the very night the horrific accident occurred. The cosmic, unforgiving cruelty of finding a beloved family member only to lose them in the exact same fleeting breath is a psychological burden that no human mind is equipped to bear. The narrative boldly transports the audience back to that fateful, horrifying night, painting a vivid, harrowing flashback that finally illuminates the dark, hidden corners of Luna's demise. The scene is masterfully set amidst a chaotic, disorienting atmosphere. A torrential, blinding downpour in an obscured, shadowy location that perfectly mirrors the internal confusion and mounting panic of the terrifying moment. The audience is forced to witness the catastrophic events exclusively through Melissa's traumatized, fractured perspective. It is entirely clear that this is not a scene of premeditated violence or cold-blooded murder, but a sudden, catastrophic collision of tragic circumstances. When a horrific accident occurs, the initial shock is quickly superseded by a horrifying, dawning recognition. In the immediate, bloody aftermath of the devastating accident, the true, unvarnished horror of the situation begins to violently unfold. As Melissa frantically rushes to the side of the fallen, bleeding victim, the realization strikes her with the catastrophic force of a lightning bolt. The fragile woman bleeding out on the cold, unforgiving ground before her is not a nameless stranger, nor is she merely a distant professional colleague. Through a sudden, shocking revelation, Melissa learns the absolute truth of their biological sisterhood. The psychological whiplash of this singular moment is entirely, utterly paralyzing. In the span of a single, agonizing heartbeat, Melissa miraculously gains a sister and helplessly watches her begin to slip away into the eternal darkness. The emotional gravity of this harrowing scene is suffocating, a masterfully crafted depiction of pure trauma. The frantic, desperate, and ultimately doomed struggle to save Luna is a sequence of sheer, unmitigated agony. Melissa's frantic actions are driven by a primal, fierce, instinctive need to violently preserve the fading life of her newly discovered kin, her mounting panic rapidly escalating into a hysterical, deafening crescendo. She screams for desperate help into the empty, uncaring night, her voice violently cracking with a profound despair that tears at the very fabric of her soul. Every passing, agonizing second is an absolute lifetime of torment as she helplessly watches the vibrant light slowly fade from Luna's beautiful eyes. The crushing, suffocating realization of her own pathetic impotence, the agonizing knowledge that her desperate, blood-soaked efforts are failing, completely fractures Melissa's fragile mind. She is a terrified, heartbroken woman watching her own precious bloodline extinguish before her very eyes. It is in this exact, terrible moment of absolute, soul-crushing despair that blinding panic, the great, unforgiving destroyer of human reason, takes complete and total control of Melissa's actions. As the horrifying reality of Luna's irreversible death settles over the gruesome scene like a heavy, suffocating shroud, a new, deeply terrifying thought violently invades Melissa's completely fractured mind. She is kneeling beside a dead, bloody body, her own trembling hands and clothes deeply stained with the undeniable evidence of the tragedy. The circumstantial evidence is absolutely, undeniably damning. In her severely traumatized state, the overwhelming fear of being wrongfully accused of brutal murder, of being publicly branded a horrific monster who slaughtered her own newly discovered sister, becomes an overwhelming, all-consuming terror. The logical, rational part of her brain is entirely silenced by the deafening roar of a primal survival instinct. Driven exclusively by this blinding, irrational fear, Melissa makes the tragic, fateful, and entirely catastrophic decision that will ultimately seal her doom. She runs. She cowardly abandons the gruesome scene, leaving behind the lifeless, cold body of her biological sister, fleeing frantically into the dark, unforgiving shadows like a guilty, hunted fugitive. This terrible act of flight, born absolutely not of calculated malice, but of pure, unadulterated panic, is the very action that unfairly casts her in the role of the despicable villain in the eyes of the unforgiving world. Every frantic, stumbling step she takes away from Luna's body is a step deeper into a dark, self-made psychological prison of immense guilt and massive deception. The physical act of running away is perfectly mirrored by her deep psychological retreat, as she subsequently builds a massive, impenetrable fortress of complex lies to hide the horrific truth. Returning violently to the present timeline, the captivated audience watches in stunned silence as the cold facade Melissa has so carefully maintained for long, agonizing months completely and utterly disintegrates into dust. Confronted with the undeniable, scientific proof of Remy's DNA test, the massive dam holding back her immense, turbulent ocean of grief finally bursts with catastrophic force. Melissa violently collapses to the floor, her trembling body racked with violent, uncontrollable, and deeply agonizing sobs. The stoic, guarded woman who bravely faced down R.J. Forrester's cruel blackmail and navigated the incredibly complex romantic entanglements with Will Spencer is completely gone, replaced by a broken, shattered shell of a human being. Her emotional breakdown is visceral, raw, and deeply uncomfortable to witness, a completely unfiltered, heartbreaking display of a soul in pure, unadulterated agony. This monumental, earth-shattering revelation forces a complete, fundamental paradigm shift in exactly how the audience, and eventually the other characters within the show, perceive the complex character of Melissa Dillon. She is instantaneously transformed from a cold, calculating suspect, or a willing accomplice covering for a mysterious killer, into a profoundly tragic, deeply broken victim of horrific circumstance. Her intensely guarded nature, her fierce secrecy, and her frustrating vulnerability to RJ's cruel blackmail. All of these previously questionable traits are suddenly, brilliantly recontextualized. They are absolutely no longer the defining hallmarks of a cold villain, but the desperate, fragile coping mechanisms of a severely traumatized, grieving woman desperately clinging to the very edge of her sanity. The narrative brilliantly subverts all prior expectations, turning a standard murder mystery into a deeply heartbreaking exploration of immense grief. However, while the audience may easily find ample room for deep empathy and understanding, the impending, explosive reaction of the powerful Forrester family looms on the horizon like a dark, terrifying storm. The Forresters are a legendary dynasty built entirely on fierce loyalty, immense legacy, and a fierce, almost ruthless protection of their own beloved blood. When the shocking truth inevitably reaches the ears of the powerful Ridge Forrester, the formidable Steffi Forrester Finnegan, and the rest of the fiercely protective clan, the emotional fallout will be absolutely apocalyptic. To the grieving Forresters, Luna was a deeply cherished presence, an incredibly bright light extinguished far too soon by a cruel world. The horrific revelation that Melissa was not only present at the exact time of Luna's tragic death, but as her biological sister, who cowardly fled the bloody scene, will be met with unbridled, explosive contempt and absolute, unyielding disgust. The terrifying anticipation of this impending, righteous wrath adds an unbearable, suffocating layer of intense tension to Melissa's already incredibly precarious situation. Ridge, who previously refused RJ's furious demands to fire Melissa, will undoubtedly view her continued presence as a grotesque, unforgivable insult to Luna's sacred memory. Steffi will likely unleash her formidable, legendary fury directly upon Melissa. The revelation will completely obliterate the complex dynamics Melissa currently shares with the younger generation. RJ Forrester will likely pivot entirely from blackmail to outright, aggressive hostility, using this devastating truth to utterly destroy her career. And Will Spencer, who has harbored lingering feelings for Melissa, will be entirely repulsed by her perceived ultimate cowardice. Melissa now finds herself entirely isolated, cast out violently into a cold, unforgiving wilderness of harsh judgment. She is permanently trapped in a dark prison of her own making. The glittering facade of the Los Angeles fashion world often hides the darkest and most agonizing personal battles, and no one understands this dichotomy better than Katie Logan Spencer. Over the past few weeks, the pressure cooker of her life has been steadily reaching a dangerous boiling point. Katie has been riding high on the undeniable professional triumph of her latest fashion event alongside Bill Spencer, a showcase that brilliantly utilized the legendary designs of Eric Forrester. It was a moment of sheer professional validation, a testament to her sharp business acumen and her unyielding determination to carve out her own legacy. Yet, this soaring success was immediately met with the crushing weight of familial discord, specifically the relentless and vindictive hostility of her own sister, Brooke Logan Forrester. Brooke's fury over Katie's use of Eric's designs has been nothing short of a relentless storm. The older Logan sister, fiercely protective of the Forrester legacy and perhaps harboring her own deep-seated insecurities, has launched a campaign of emotional warfare against Katie. Every board meeting, every family gathering, and every passing interaction has been laced with Brooke's venomous disapproval. For Katie, a woman who has spent her entire life fighting to step out from the overwhelming shadows cast by her older sisters, this hostility is not just a professional annoyance. It is a profound emotional betrayal. The stress of constantly defending her worth, her brand, and her right to exist in the cutthroat world of high fashion has been quietly eroding her spirit, laying the groundwork for a catastrophic physical collapse. Beneath the surface of this corporate warfare lies a much more fragile and terrifying reality: Katie's physical heart. The legacy of Storm Logan, the brother who tragically took his own life to give Katie the gift of a functioning heart, beats within her chest as a constant, rhythmic reminder of sacrifice and survival. This transplanted heart, a medical marvel and a symbol of profound familial love, is not invincible. It requires a delicate balance of physical care and emotional stability, two things that have been entirely absent from Katie's life in recent days. The psychological weight of carrying a borrowed heart while simultaneously fighting brutal battles against the very family that Hart was meant to keep her connected to is a poetic and devastating tragedy. The stress hormones flooding her system, the sleepless nights spent agonizing over Brooke's potential sabotage, and the sheer exhaustion of her daily life have been silently attacking the very organ that keeps her alive. As if the professional warfare with Brooke were not enough, Katie's domestic life has transformed into an absolute battlefield, centered entirely around her son, Will Spencer. Will's life has recently spiraled into a chaotic web of romantic entanglements, bitter rivalries, and shocking betrayals. The revelation of Ivy Forrester's dirty manipulation, specifically her interception of a crucial letter meant to reunite Will and Electra Forrester, has sent shockwaves through the family. Will is currently navigating a messy love quadrangle, torn between his lingering feelings for Melissa Dillon, his complicated history with Electra, and his escalating, volatile feud with RJ Forrester. RJ's relentless insults and manipulative tactics, including pressuring a vulnerable Melissa into a toxic alliance, have pushed Will to the brink of his own emotional limits. As a fiercely protective mother, Katie has been absorbing every ounce of her son's pain, frustration, and rage. This explosive combination of professional stress and maternal anxiety culminated in a fateful, devastating confrontation with Bill Spencer. The sprawling, opulent living room of the Spencer estate, usually a sanctuary of wealth and power, transformed into an arena of fierce ideological warfare. Bill, ever the ruthless and pragmatic patriarch, argued for a heavy-handed, aggressive approach to handling Will's chaotic life and the ongoing drama at Forster Creations. He wanted to bulldoze the obstacles, crush RJ's arrogance, and forcefully steer Will's future in a direction he deemed appropriate. Katie, operating from a place of deep maternal empathy and emotional exhaustion, vehemently opposed Bill's tyrannical tactics. She argued passionately for Will's autonomy, begging Bill to see the emotional wreckage their son was currently navigating rather than treating him as another corporate asset to be managed. The argument escalated with terrifying speed, the volume of their voices echoing off the high ceilings as years of unspoken resentments and fundamental differences in parenting collided. Bill's overbearing nature clashed violently with Katie's desperate need to protect her son's fragile emotional state. As the debate reached a fever pitch, the atmosphere in the room grew thick with tension. Katie's face flushed, her breathing became shallow and erratic, and the words she was forcefully hurling at Bill began to catch in her throat. The invisible, cumulative weight of Brooke's relentless pressure, the stress of the fashion line, and the agonizing worry for Will suddenly manifested in a violent, physical rebellion within her own body. In a horrifying, slow-motion sequence that will forever be burned into Bill Spencer's memory, the fierce, defiant fire in Katie's eyes suddenly extinguished, replaced by a look of absolute, paralyzing terror. She stopped mid-sentence, her hands flying to her chest as a sudden, agonizing pain ripped through her torso. It was not a simple ache. It was a crushing, suffocating grip, a terrifying echo of the heart failure that had haunted her youth. The remnants of her past transplant, the delicate, aging tissues of Storm's heart, were finally buckling under the unbearable strain. Katie gasped for air that refused to fill her lungs, her knees giving out beneath her as the world spun into a dizzying blur of darkness. Bill's imposing figure froze for a fraction of a second, his mind struggling to comprehend the sudden shift from a fiery domestic dispute to a life-or-death medical emergency. The invincible dollar bill Spencer, a man who commanded empires and crushed his enemies without a second thought, was reduced to a state of sheer, unadulterated panic. He lunged forward, catching Katie just before she hit the hardwood floor, his strong arms cradling her suddenly fragile frame. He screamed her name, his voice cracking with a desperation that stripped away decades of his carefully cultivated, ruthless facade. The sight of the woman he loved, the mother of his child,